Yeah.
On with the show. This is it. No more
Hello,
promise, and
everybody.
we know our parts by heart.
All right. There we go. All right. So, Rick, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. And yourself, Mike?
All right. I guess I've had baseball a little bit more on the brain lately, so I was just doing some stuff. That's what I was doing earlier. That's why I didn't get the invites out till late. But anyways,
Yeah.
aside from that,
And here I thought you'd have more pool on the brain with that cue ball of yours.
yeah. Well, I know I did actually go and say hi to Rex and Shadowhawk and Doc earlier when they were on. Um, went
Cool.
on for a moment to visit with them on Rex's stream, so did that at some point. But anyways, now you can tell that my background here is a lot brighter because of course it's daylight savings time and stuff like that. So but I got to be careful because directly
Yeah.
behind me is a reflective surface, and sometimes if I duck my head down, that's gonna likely um uh, yeah.
Blind everybody with that reflection off your your chrome dome.
Not my chrome dome as much, but the stuff behind me. So yeah. So
Yeah,
anyways.
yeah, but the light hits your face and then bounces off and blinds people.
Well, I know.
I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
I know Doc and Rex were commenting on it earlier. Doc even said he liked it. So, yeah. So basically, yeah. So, anyways, let's see. Aside from that, just pretty much same old, same old.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
get your point. So tomorrow, I'm going to an amusement park in the area. Um,
Oh yeah, that's the one you walk to, right?
yeah, well, I walked to the area of it, and I'm gonna walk to it tomorrow too. But I'm actually going to go to it because it opened on Saturday, yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's open during the week. It's open from 11 to 5:30. So I'm gonna leave where I'm at about 9:30. Take the hour walk. Get there about half an hour before everything opens. Get my ticket. Get in line, and see whether I can waste 6.5 hours in it. Riding the rides and all that.
Mm-hmm. Getting to it during the week when of course not as many people are there that would be on the weekend. That probably is a good way to go about it.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be nice and sunny tomorrow too, so that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And March, most kids are in school, so yeah,
Yeah, I mean you will you will have of course
March
there
break,
will
but
be
wasn't
spring
that
break
last
coming
week?
up. I don't know if you guys have it up there or not, but
Yeah, we have
spring
March
break.
break, but I think that was last week.
Oh, okay.
I think we're ending March break. I could be wrong. I don't know when it is anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly.
Well,
you know,
even I have a general idea when spring break is, but yeah,
yeah,
I guess you
March.
call it, yeah. Well, sometimes more. It's usually right around Easter, so it's like usually the week before or after whenever Easter is. So, um,
Well, maybe we're talking about two different things. I know there's March break, which is in March. I think it's the second or third week in March. I'm thinking the second, and then of course, although spring break there might be one for schools, which is March break, and I think spring break might be more colleges.
Well,
I
no,
don't know.
well, okay, so well, I think where we're having maybe a little bit of a difference here is it, the terminology may be different or applied differently here in the States than it is in Canada. In the States
Yeah,
here, spring break is used universally as that 1 week you get off during the spring, usually right around Easter, you know, um, usually either
yeah, it
the week
might.
before or the week after, and it applies at all school level. It's a school thing usually. It's you know now basically depending upon where you live and stuff like that. As I said, some have it the week before, some have it the week after. You know, Easter basically. So it's like, uh, in other words, some areas have it the week leading into Easter Sunday. Others have it with basically the Friday, starting with Good Friday and going through to the next week. So that's depending on how That's how we do it here in the States. And usually spring break's a big deal
Yeah,
for the colleges, as you said, because that's usually for them. They usually will go down, particularly those in the Northeast will go down to Florida and just party like it's 1999, as it were.
yeah.
There's
I was
Captain
just looking
Kennedy.
up. I was just looking it up, and I found Wikipedia's thing. It says spring break, known variously as Easter vacation, Easter holiday, Easter break, spring vacation, mid-term break, study week, reading period, Easter week, or March break, is a vacation period including Easter holidays in Northern Hemisphere. Well, Easter is until the end of this month this year, so
Hmm. Yeah. So, anyways, um, all right. Well, why don't we start? Well, first off, why don't I start off by letting you want to do an intro, Rick? I know we've already been talking already, but still, you want to do an intro? Maybe
well,
talk about any project you're working on. Share any links.
well,
You get the gist, right?
uh, I'm going to share a link to a video I posted yesterday on my YouTube channel, on my Cross Comics one, for possible music for Canadian Shield. It's only got 2 views, so maybe we could give that up there. I'll probably put a couple other ones in later because I'm going to try slowly doing a bunch of reaction videos to movies over on my Pied Piper of Hamilton channel. I'm not sure whether I should change that to Pied Piper of Chilliwack or not. I don't know.
Hmm.
Well, I am from Hamilton, so originally, so I guess it sort of makes sense.
Well, why not? Well,
Um,
I
yeah,
guess there'd be too many other Pied Piper channels. That's why you just wouldn't go with just simply calling yourself the Pied Piper channel.
yeah. Um, but also, I've secured somebody to do Canadian Shield 3, the pencils and the inks. So that should hopefully be finished in the next 3 to 4 months. I'm probably gonna contact him about getting together and talking about some materials that I gave him, see how things are going. I'll probably do that tomorrow, since I think it'll almost been a week tomorrow that we talked. I gave him some stuff.
Hmm.
Hopefully, we'll have the first page in the next week or so. Maybe the first couple pages. Yay!
All right.
So I guess that's about it for now for me.
All right. So, anyways, we now
And
are.
hello, Captain Finity. You finally changed your name back.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw he was on, and I did highlight him and stuff like that. So, as always, guys, just reminding the chat, of course, if you guys help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and we will try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. All right. So, anyways, Rick.
And Captain, is that supposed to be the red ring of death? I'm not sure whether in the back room it shows a red ring, but a red circle. That's what it shows on the YouTube. So,
well, it's so I've got like a. It looks pink to me, but anyways.
no, I didn't think so, but I thought I'd tease.
Yeah. Ah, Metal's here. Hey, Metal.
Hey, Metal.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Well, thanks for coming. Welcome back. Welcome back to online, my friend. Okay.
So did you end up moving or staying where you were?
At the moment, we're still here. It's a mess. I don't want to talk about it.
Okay. Right. No problem.
All right. Well, then I will ask if there's the one thing that you might want to tell. Since I just had Rick do his intro, would you like to do an intro, talk about maybe any projects you're working on, promote anything, put any links up, share any links? The floor is yours.
I guess. Hey, I'm the Metal currently. I guess the Vomitorium is back in action, though. That's just going to be the brand of the channel. We're actually focusing on specific shows now. On Monday, we're doing more of like a film and media show. So like anything that's movies, TV, animation, stuff like that. Even if we're going to talk about comics, basically non-interactive media will be on that show. And on Thursdays will be more of like the interactive entertainment. So like video games, tabletop, whether it's RPG, trading card games, even like toys and collectibles, things like that will be on the other show, which we already did our first one last Thursday. So that's fun. Go over to the Vomitorium. I'll drop that link in a second. Or
I think I popped in for a few minutes and I remember hearing you say that. Granted, it was like towards the end of it.
It was like right at the end. Yeah.
Well,
I popped in at some point too.
It just takes me a while to type stuff out. So like I think I was there for a couple of minutes, as you were ending. So it just took me a while to type everything out though. So there's a link if you guys want to go check that out, the Vomitorium.
Yeah, and I'm also that magazine that I was talking about last year. I've been working on assets and stuff for that while I was offline. So that is something I'm planning on doing this year, though it might take even longer than I originally planned because I think I couldn't help myself, and I think I doubled the page count. So yeah, that's a thing.
That happens, right?
Yeah.
Life happens, right?
It's like, well, there was more stories I wanted to put in it. Like I originally did a poll to try to limit the stories. I'm like, no, but I want to put more in it anyway. So I'm probably just gonna end up putting almost all the stories that I put on the poll in instead of the point of having a poll in the first place. So that's kind of dumb. But
hello,
that's also
Lady Bodley.
And
hello, Lady Bodley. Oh, what was that?
I might also be having a premium comic running with an artist soon. Probably digital first. I don't know how we're going to handle printing after that. If we do, it'll probably be print on demand. But I do have some plans for some stuff this year. That's not just like free web comics. So.
And then you put another. Is this your link to your book here?
That's my publication. Yeah, X Time is Chaos. All my stuff is on there.
All right. Well, welcome, Lady Voldy, to the Mikestand. I hope you'll enjoy the show. As always, guys, if you haven't already, if you guys can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here that we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. We'll try to answer the questions to the best of our ability. So, here we go. All right.
She says, yes, Lady Vald E.
Voldy. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you for the clarification on that. I'm pretty sure that I hope you'll enjoy the show as we continue on here. All right. So, was there anything else you wanted to add to any of that, Metal?
I don't know. Probably the fact that I spent the last couple months just rewatching like 1,500 episodes of anime while I was working. So,
well,
not much.
you probably know. Metal. I've actually moved. I'm actually
Yes,
on the
I'm
West
aware.
Coast now. Okay.
He's on the
I wasn't sure,
west
just
coast of Canada. He's just north of me a few 100,000 miles or so.
so
Yeah,
now
I have a.
instead of being an hour from you, I'm 2 hours behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I haven't been able to like really watch people's shows or hop on streams or anything, but I have been able to occasionally check like Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. So I've been
Yeah,
keeping up
and
with
Yeah.
some things
I'm
when I can.
thankful that you kept me in the loop because I've been waiting you to come back as you've been one of my more consistent regulars. So, I was hoping to get you back on here. We can talk more about that after the show, of course. Because
Yeah, because like I told you, I will not be available for Fridays for quite a while, but I can still hop on the Sunday show.
all right. Well, there's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. About coming on during the week as well, but I'll go into more of that as I said.
Yeah, we could talk about that because that's going to pen schedule, but maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, but what we can at least talk. Well, I guess we'll move on to the next thing. So Rick filled in for Tim for me this past. That's why I was trying to call you on Friday there, Metal. Tim was originally scheduled to co-host, and he apparently forgot. And so I was scrambling to find a sub for him, and I was able to get Rick to come in. So, in this past Friday, I went over comics that went on sale in February 1940 from
Timely
Marvel.
Comics.
Yeah, Timely, what was known then as Timely, what we now know as Marvel. We went over Marvel Mystery Comic Volume 1, Issue 6, and Mystic Comic Volume 1, Issue 2. We read 3 stories. We read Human Torch, Namor, and Flexo the Rubber Man. So, Rick,
Actually,
if you want to tell for those who missed the show, give your impressions on what we read.
Well, the one wasn't just Namor; it was Prince Namor, the Submariner. They upgraded his name a little bit. Of course, it was Namor being Namor, villainous, we'll say, saying that he would answer for his crimes and not expecting to answer for his crimes, trying to make recompense, but not wanting to answer for his crimes for the way that the courts in America wanted him to. Although I can get the one part not wanting to die. So, but not wanting to let.
So basically, what happened in the story was earlier in the story arc, he had committed murder basically, and
several.
So the thing was that they wanted to execute him for those murders, but in a way, their reasoning for that, even though he had shown that he was willing to do anything but die. Obviously, he was willing to kind of repent. He he helped them capture some criminals and all that.
Although I don't think he would have even stood for staying in prison for the rest of his life, or a few decades.
Well, here's one of the other issues that kind of came up too, right? The reason that they felt they had to kill him was because they were too worried that if they let him stay alive or they let him stay free, he'd just turn on them.
Well, that's not the reason.
Really based on the facts of the case that they decided to kill him. They killed him for what he might do, not what he did.
No. That's the reason they found him guilty. The reason that they were going to kill him, that was the penalty for that crime. And he was found guilty, and they just wouldn't absolve him because he was going around doing some good work. It didn't absolve him of the murders. He was found guilty of the murders. He even admitted to doing it on the stand. And the penalty for murder back then.
Here's another thing too that we may have kind of brushed on too a little bit. The fact that they started calling him Prince Namor in this issue, right? And thereby, well, you'd have to. Well, even though Atlantis didn't have any kind of diplomatic relationships with America at the time, would he have had the chance to get like diplomatic immunity too? You know.
And El Cavantiac says, "Hail, you. What is this about a Jersey murder? Oh, a comic book murder. Somewhat less serious. Yes, yeah. We're talking about Namor, how he committed. We're talking about the story that we read for Namor on Friday. How he had committed several murders in previous issues, and now he's being taken to account by the United States court system, and not really wanting to be held accountable. Well, he was, but he wasn't. It was only if they found in his way.
Well, I mean, he is a prince, though. It's. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the episode of Justice League where the enemy below with Aquaman.
Yeah, well,
where Superman suggested to him that he take his grievances to the United Nations as a king. He tried to do that, and then they just kind of refused. They don't because they said they didn't recognize his, and that's kind of the situation Namor, you could argue, found himself in.
Yeah. Although, the United Nations existed, I think, at that point, but I'm not sure whether they were quite as powerful back then as they are today. But
actually, well, okay, well, in the Justice League America, they were because that was it said in modern time. But no, there was.
Wait, what year is it?
1940.
The United Nations was founded in 1945.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought they might have existed, but I guess they didn't come together.
Well, there was a less powerful version of it for a while there in the just after World War One. The only problem is that the only reason it was less powerful is because not all the nations were behind it. That was the League of Nations that Woodrow Wilson had pushed for.
Yeah, and Elk was just saying that League of Nations, and it was founded in 1919. So, okay, it wasn't the United Nations; it was the League of Nations, U.S. state of. So he couldn't have even appealed to those people because it couldn't appeal to the United Nations because it didn't exist. Appeal to the League of Nations, maybe, but the U.S. wasn't part of it, so it wouldn't probably matter. It's just, but basically, because Namor didn't get his way, he threw a tantrum, blamed people that weren't to blame, Namor being Namor, as I said. So it's interesting that you see this. In some ways, I say it's interesting that you see this comic. This, I would say villain, or I'm not. I would not. Maybe he's starting to become an anti-hero at best.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, we've had that debate quite a bit on here over time. Where is he really a villain? Is he really an anti-hero? Is he, because it's like it depends upon your perspective, right? That's the point I've always made. Yes,
I think he's just a jerk.
As American, and from the American perspective, he was probably he's a villain because
I'd probably say that
he was taking along his own hands, regardless. But to his people, to the people that he's from, to Atlanteans, he's not a villain out of anything. He's a hero to them because
possibly, because everywhere else in the world he'd be a villain.
From the Atlantean perspective, the villains from the Atlantean perspective are the surface dwellers who have done a whole bunch, who in their view has done a bunch of evil things like pollute their oceans and make
Yeah,
wars.
but therein lies the problem. They didn't even know that country existed, or that nation, whatever you want to call Atlantis. You know, they didn't know it existed, but Atlantis knew, maybe not every city, or every nation, but they knew surface nations existed. They didn't even know a nation existed below the sea.
Metal. Do you have anything you want to add to this particular debate, or any comment?
Well, like if we're gonna consider how things are even in reality, I don't even think you could end up painting an entire nation as to what their opinions of him would be, like even his own, right? You could probably understand that if they are dealing with pollution, that the bulk of Atlanteans would probably see him as a hero. But even in real life, right, you have Americans that aren't even a fan of when the U.S. does retaliatory strikes. So there'd probably be Atlanteans like that too. Regardless, I still just think he's a jerk.
Yeah, ultimately, for sure.
Well, yeah. The whole core of this debate we've been having, Mel, and Rick and I have had it, is whether or not it is Namor a full-on villain? Is he an anti-hero? And I've always, and I get what you're saying too. It may not be a sentiment that may be shared by 100% of the. It's like not 100% of all Americans probably think he's a villain. Not 100% all of Atlanteans probably think he's a hero. I get that idea, but I'm talking about more in generalities.
Well, okay, there's one answer to this, right? Because I have an issue with a lot of people's definition of an anti-hero. Because an anti-hero is still not somebody who commits acts of villainy. It's somebody who doesn't live up to the moral code that you expect from a hero. Like they will get down and dirty, but they're still trying to achieve a good goal, and they're trying to not I don't know. Anti-heroes don't kidnap people. It's something that they started doing now, because we've stretched the definition of anti-hero. But they might kill somebody that deserves to be killed, while a normal superhero feels like they're above killing. So you have to ask, did this person commit an act of villainy in their cause? And if they did, they're a villain. Even if they ultimately did something
well, basically, he was, depending on which side you're going on, of course, but he was going around killing people, basically waging war against the states and certain people. So,
well, war in itself is not an act of villainy.
Yeah, and as we sort of said, not necessarily either is killing people, but he killed people just for looking at them the wrong way or whatever, too.
Well, no, I think because I've read a few more of the stories. I think a lot of the people I think the people that he killed in those stories were actually the bad guys. I think, I don't. Well, actually, no, he did. I think he did kill. He did kill. He may have killed a cop too. But I think it was in the cop. They were trying to go after him, and he was in part defending himself. But
yeah, but there was a couple other times that I know he. I can't remember the exact instances. It's been a while, and I haven't read it a lot. But a couple times that he just killed people that were, I think he killed people on an oil rig or a submarine or something like that. I forget exactly. We'd have to go back and look, obviously. But
obviously,
not right now.
But it's just an interesting dynamic. Somebody said, "Oh, was that you, Rick?" Or
I was probably said, "Oh," but I forget what for, or something to that effect. I don't know.
All right, so
the
Namor story and part of the reason why I like continuing reading that, now granted, I think with this now we now have hit a break where now they're going to move on to another arc. So but one of the things about this that I think sparked a good conversation is how from what perspective do you wish to see Namor in, because
Yeah, well, I get where you're coming from, like that in his people's eyes, or most of his people's eyes, that he would be a hero. But as the comic reader's perspective, you're going to take, we'll say, the nation that you're from's perspective, or a joining one like me. I'm in Canada, not the States. You know, so to us, he would be look more like the villain. It
yeah,
would
and
really
I
be,
acknowledge that, and I've
yeah.
I've
And that, I
acknowledged.
guess that's why I say he's a straight up villain. It's just like Doctor Doom, right? He does stuff for
Okay, actually, I'm
Loctave.
going to push back on that because that's not how stories work, right? The nation you're from, or even are allied or adjacent to, has nothing to do with how you interpret a story. It's the perspective you're given from, like, the narrator or just the camera in some cases, right? So it's more of how
Yeah.
does the story itself frame the character from this perspective you're given.
I can definitely see your point there. I was just saying, because we are in, Canada, the States, it adds to the dynamic, if you will.
Well,
Especially if
put
the
yourself in the
character's
shoes of, like, what if
attacking
somebody
your
from,
nation,
like,
your people.
what if someone from Zimbabwe randomly read this comic? Right. So do
I
you
guess.
try to take the nation out of it and just be
Yeah.
like, what is the perspective you're actually being shown in the story? Are they
Yeah.
framing him as a bad person?
I don't think they're.
And
I wouldn't
at
say
least
that they're
at least
trying to.
yeah, I mean, the perspective I'm taking from it in that is, I'm taking the perspective that even if Namor is doing quote unquote acts of villainy or evil deed, like murder and stuff like that, I'm taking the perspective that from his perspective, he's justified in doing it. Which is another probably interesting dynamic in all that.
And Alex says, "Ooh, metal. I quite disagree. I think we vastly underestimate the power of nationalism still to shape our reactions to both art and reality."
I'm not actually disagreeing with that at all. Okay. I'm saying Rick can choose to interpret it that way, because the problem is you don't actually get to choose how you interpret art, right? There's a lot of emotion involved in it. But when we are looking at a story, we do have to try to look at the story the way the story frames it.
Yeah, and the creator, if you will, maybe intended, the writer.
Yeah, and it was, I
That
believe,
can
Bill
matter
Everett.
too.
And I've read this story before. I actually just think it's framed as war. I don't even think they're actually making anybody out to be like a particular hero or villain.
It's
Yeah,
just war. It's just a
I
war
could agree
story.
with that. It's just, if I guess, as I agree that it's probably just framed sort of as war, but as a superhero.
Oh, I mean, he's talking about what I said
Fan.
before, with the nationality, particularly whether you support a war. I mean, the bulk of people, yeah, but you'll always find your outliers.
Yeah, almost all Russians support the Ukrainian war. Um, for instance,
For instance,
and are exposed um, to multiple sources of information that support that view.
Also, that's not even particularly true. It was at the start, but they were losing home ground support very quickly throughout the Ukrainian war.
but
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, well, I think we can go back and forth on this topic of Namor and perspective.
Well,
Probably till the cows come home.
more of it will probably, as over time,
And we'll probably get into it
stories.
again.
We'll see how all that frames out too. It's like,
Well,
yeah,
I will push back against what I said, though. Unlike the Ukrainian war, where you can lose support, the reason they lose support is because of what it's costing the people. Namor's a one-man army. It's not going to cost the Atlanteans anything for him to wage his war.
yeah, unless the states retaliates against him and their nation. Then Alex says something. I think our emotional.
but then again, as I pointed out, as I was saying, I think that from Namor and the Atlanteans' perspective, they feel justified in this because the surface, even if it was done out of ignorance, you know, from their perspective, from the Atlantean perspective, right? The surface dwellers did harm to the Atlanteans, even if it
Well, I guess
was out of ignorance.
it also costs them not having their king around. So it really actually depends on how dissolved their government is. It could be really bad not having your king around because he's off fighting a war.
Yeah. Well,
That he
I
doesn't
don't know as much
necessarily
about
have to
that
fight.
because some of the people, in the story, some of the people are actually calling for him to go out and wage war. But as I recall, but anyways, so Elk was saying here, I think our emotional decision making is based on thousands of small assumptions that we take in. By the time large decisions are to be made, our emotions have already constructed a view with.
Yeah, with betting of assumptions our emotions lie in. Yeah, I
With
would agree.
Yeah,
For most.
probably. I mean, we are procedurally, like I guess generated, but we our instincts, our emotions, even our thoughts that come to us are kind of procedurally acquired through the buildup of everything that we did in our life ever since we were a small child. So, like, you can't exactly escape it. But that's
Yeah.
also, and here's a term people have been throwing around, and I hate the term, just because people have been misusing it a lot, was the whole media literacy. And everybody using it actually doesn't even know the first thing about media literacy. But that's why you have to take the narrative frame as written, right? Or from the person or what you see. We can even take that with mythology back then. Right. We would interpret Greek mythology completely differently if we tried to interpret it strictly from the view of being like modern day North Americans, as opposed to like how the stories would have traveled back in the days of like, well, it actually depends on history, anywhere from the Mycenaeans to the Macedonians, you know?
Yeah, this is a pretty good conversation we're having, by the way. A lot of
Yeah.
thought provoking, back and forth. I think it's one of the things I always hope to have happen on these shows is that a lot of this thought provoking back and forth, these discussions. I mean, really will make you think. Make you think about some of this stuff. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And a good flowing conversation is always good too. It helps keeps the lulls out of the way, and but as I was gonna say, we'll probably go over belabor these points again and again as we bring up Namor whenever
Yeah,
he's
I know.
read.
I know you're dropping the hint that you think it's time for us to move on, right?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, well, exactly. But also, I'm trying
Well,
to make it
I was about to. I
smooth.
was about to, Rick. So I was getting
Yeah.
there.
Well,
So
I was trying to help you
yeah.
to make it a
Okay.
smooth transition.
Yeah. Well, speaking of
So,
transition,
also there was.
go ahead,
I was
Rick.
going to say also there was the Human Torch that we read.
Which
And
was
well,
where I was going to let you go with that. Go for it.
yeah. Um, and of course, that was just the Human Torch. That was a hero and against monsters, I think, more type or spies. I forget.
So
I
basically,
think they.
the story. Uh,
Go ahead.
okay, so the story there was a couple of I think it was actually saboteurs or spies or something like that who were basically wanting to try to get some plans to a weapon of some type that was in a bank vault, not in the hands of the government, but in a bank vault, mind you. A professor had
Yeah.
created some kind of weapon or something like that.
Yeah, I think that
And
was the biggest leap of
so,
logic that
so
he put the plans in a
what they
bank vault.
decided
That
to
was
do, of course, what they decided to do to try to get people out of the town, get people away from the bank, they went and started a forest fire, and then they went and robbed the bank or tried to rob the bank of the plans and lot. That was basically the gist of what was going on there.
Yeah, and they did, and somehow the Human Torch figured out exactly where they were without, no clue after they'd been gone. Who knows how long? But yeah, it was against spies, saboteurs, some people trying to make money off of making a weapon. And I guess the biggest leap in logic in that is you think that those plans would have been in the hands of the government somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
where they would have been a lot harder to get to. Especially if a few thugs know about it. I'm sure the government knows, even back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there was one other one that was
Flexo the Rubber Man.
Oh yeah, that was two guys that invented a rubber robot, basically.
Yeah.
That was
Actually, when I
interesting.
read it, when I first introduced that character a few months back, when I first read that story, they had said that Flexo had actually been retconned into becoming a symbiote.
Oh,
Like
okay. Or that's what
Venom.
they're calling it now.
But as pointed out here, when they first introduced him, he was not a symbiote. He was basically a rubber robot, rubberized robot.
Yeah, so he's just obeying everything he did. It was a nice story, but it was a bit bland in my opinion. Again, they were going forget who they were after. Unfortunately, with the main hero, if you will, not really doing anything. Well, he does stuff, but just at the commands of those that are controlling him. So he has
Well,
no.
they have a button that helps him. Yeah, I mean, but he's a robot. He's a robotic hero. Basically at the whim of the scientists who created him. Basically a pair of brothers,
So
Joel and Josh
that
Williams. And I think it was Joel who was going off to Washington to display another weapon for the government, to showcase another weapon, and some bad guys wanted to get hold of that weapon, but so.
Okay, soon we will have millions of rubber robots with many tentacles.
Yes, I've seen enough hentai to know where that's going.
I haven't seen much or any hentai, and I already get where that's going.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I want to know though. So, I guess it was interesting, but I think without the main hero, does that make the scientists the heroes? They control them, tell them what to do. Is the robot the hero? But
Well,
he
I
has.
think the scientists are the brains of the outfit. The robot is, they basically have a button. They will send him to, deal with whatever,
Yeah,
emergency arrives.
he's the muscle, but I guess it's just that he has no personality either. He's a mindless automaton, and I don't think that's really a good thing for a hero.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't. Let me go back and double check because the series did last a little while at least for a year or so. Let me see if I can.
Well, people back then were into it, and I guess that's all right. I'm just saying, for me, it's not
Well,
all
I
that
think it was.
compelling.
I think because it was a robot, and even if the robot didn't have like any kind of personality or anything like that to it, um, the robot doing doing what he could do and all that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think something. Although they said he could fly and do a couple other things. It's like, okay, he's a rubber robot that can fly. I'm not sure whether that makes sense or not, but I guess you could put that in that somehow. Some sort of block, jet boots or whatever. But
All right. So I
Yeah,
just
Alex
pulled up
says
the. Oh,
Alex says that a classic theme of sci-fi, especially Cold War sci-fi, was the morality of science, of
yeah,
scientific
scientific
advances.
advances. Hmm. Well, I just pulled up the Marvel database wiki here with Flexo's
Yeah.
info here. So
And as for the quote unquote reboot, I wouldn't really, or retcon, I wouldn't really call that a retcon. I would just say repurposing the name.
so World War II. So Flexo was well, yeah, that it was the symbiote discovered inside a meteor. Okay, but that wasn't the original story there, and he debuted in Mystic Comics #1, of course, here. But his powers here, it's symbiote physiology. Again, it was repurposed as such. They say it was retcon. Um, there's Flexo's remote
Yeah.
control. So here's the trivia on him. In his original design, Flexo purportedly had a highly rubberized body that made him bulletproof and highly damage resistant. The original version of Flexo could also fly as well as move at superhuman speeds. The robot was also incredibly strong. When he was upgraded, he apparently lost many of his abilities, such as the ability to fly, but was still highly resistant to damage. His body was also outfitted with a chest compartment, which he could store objects in. Now he had 9 appearances, so he was around for at least a year here, or inside of a
Or
year.
just under a year. So that's not too bad. But, I don't know. Elk says basically the Optimimer theme, who and how are those capable of advancing science morally responsible for its effects intended and unintended?
All right. So all right, there we go. Metals.
So
Was there anything you wanted to add into that conversation?
No.
You said, no, it's almost like the way you made that sound. Almost like you don't want to touch this conversation with a 10 foot
Oh,
pole.
no. I was in and out during that part anyway, because it is St. Patty's Day and we were eating potato pancakes, so I had to run back and forth, and I finally dropped off my plate.
Okay.
cool.
Yeah, it is St. Patty. Happy St. Patty's Day to everybody for that.
Yeah. May you have a green day.
All right, so that's pretty much it. So overall, though, in terms of the selections, Rick, what did you think of the
Well, the
selection?
selections were good. The selections were good, and although like I'm not super fussy on Flexo, it's still getting to read him at least the once. Getting to know him a little bit or whatever, however you want to say it. I like I've sort of did what you doing with this, and just like you said, you started with DC. I did a lot of DC in the past. I'm not sure how far I got. I forget how far I got, but it's nice to read some of this old stuff, and get to know. Like I know I didn't do it with Marvel, although I was wanting to, but it's just definitely interesting reading all this, and it was a good selection and letting people know about these characters, whether they're great characters, mediocre, or terrible. It's this is how we got what we have today. If it wasn't for all this stuff, we wouldn't have comics today, at least in the same way. And that could be a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, depending upon depending upon how they evolve over time, how the writing and all that evolves over time too.
And that's something else. I'm starting to notice a few less plot holes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is good.
and even I was starting to notice a little bit there. Even though we're just simply into um, February of 1940 at this point now. Um, Even I'm starting to notice that there does seem to be now it's like they're starting to switch the focus a little bit. You still have your mafia types, your gangster type stories, but now they're also starting to shift to you starting to see more spy, espionage, war related stories. I think it was in January 1940. In fact, I think Dell came out with war comics. Specifically
Yeah.
war. So you're starting to see that. You're now starting to see, as we were talking about before, how some of the comic writers and creators of the time were trying to maybe influence people to maybe get more involved with the war effort in
War
Europe.
effort. Although there,
Yeah.
although there wouldn't have been much war effort yet in the States
Right.
because
Well, they had no reason to because we're still, we're in February 1940 at that point. We're still just under 2 years away from Pearl Harbor, um, so, you know,
yeah.
and at that point, of course,
Well, they
America
could have got involved
still
before
had a
Pearl
very
Harbor, but
strong
they didn't.
isolationist, ideal. They still wanted just to stay out of everybody else's business, basically. So,
Yeah.
but
So anything else we got to talk about tonight?
well, I do
Did
have
you?
something I want to go over with you guys, article wise that I covered the other day myself, and I thought would be a good, particularly with you, because Rick, you might have saw this, as growing up. There was an article that Avi Green did over on Bleeding Fool in regards to Transformers the movie, and he had some criticisms about it, and I kind of went over it.
How about reading some Canadian war comics from the 40s? Well, if
Well,
Mike's not up for it, I might be up for it. I'm actually working on trying to do a Canadian Shield read through actually at the moment.
yeah.
Hopefully that'll be
Well,
out sometime this week.
I prefer to focus on American comics, obviously, and also I wouldn't know what. I mean, that might be something that maybe Rick might want to look into. I think he'd be one better suited for that. Being that he is Canadian.
But if you want to send me some titles, either leave a thing on that there are, I can try and find them. I'll either send me an email or leave some sort of notice on somewhere on my YouTube or on what's the name of it?
With a whole flowering
Twitter.
of comics after American comics were banned.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, let me pull up the article then. This is from Bleeding Fool. Avi Green did this, and I somewhat understood his point, even though I did disagree with some aspects of what he was talking about here. Because I watched the movie myself, and even despite some of the criticism, I still thought it was a pretty good movie. But but there were some things of controversial nature, and we'll get into this. I don't know if you guys had. So this is Transformers the movie was a setback for feature-length animation. Article by Avi Green, published back on March 13th. Now, this is the G1 movie. This is the movie that came out back in, I think it was 86. This is kind of the movie that was kind of in between the end of the second season.
Beginning of the third. Yeah, I saw this in theaters myself. It was awesome. And
oh yes, I was very critical of this movie when I saw it finally.
What was that? What was that?
I said I was very critical of this movie when I finally saw it, which was very recently because Rick, I saw it with you. It was when you were doing your movie nights back in the
yeah.
Discord.
Yeah. So,
And I forgot that you just said critical. You didn't say you didn't like it, but not sure whether that means you didn't like it or not. But
well, there were
I
there
think
were a couple a couple of interesting things that even Avi will talk about here. Like first off, this is one of the I think this is one of the first instances in a movie that was actually directed towards kids. We actually did have a scene in there where one of the characters actually swore. Spike
yeah,
Spike
well, yeah,
Spike
well, it
had
depends on what you consider swearing. There, yeah, that's you said shit.
this was a full on swear word. There was no gray in this. There was a point
Well,
in
he didn't. He just said shit, right? So
yeah, it was like
that's.
oh shit, yeah, oh shit. It was basically the
I'm not sure
saying.
what. Depends. Maybe back then it
At
was
that
probably
time,
really considered,
yes,
but
right? Because you have to
now,
remember, throughout the 80s and 90s, the evangelical church had most control. Shit would definitely be considered a curse word at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
yeah,
and
which
then
I think
the
was a
other thing
little too.
they'll talk about here is like the killing off of some of the characters, particularly Optimus Prime. And I have something quite a bit to say about that, and I said it on. And I'll point that out too.
None of those were my complaints with the movie.
Yeah.
My complaints were that I thought it was terribly paced for an animated film, and part of the pacing problems is how much of it was dragged on and carried by licensed music that I would have preferred wasn't even in the movie. Like, there's this entire montage scene that I just could not stand. I'm like, why is this in the movie?
Which song is it? Weird Al song, "Dare to Be Stupid."
No, it was the one when they're on like the junk yard or whatever, where they're building things, and it's I
Oh,
can't remember
that's
the
what
song.
I well that had to do with Wreck-Gar. That would have been on that planet because that
Yeah,
would have been Wreck-Gar.
it was a different one. It was supposed to be like an uplifting song.
Oh, okay.
Like I said, I've only seen the movie once, but I remember my emotions when seeing it those few years ago when we watched it.
What was it? Was it The Touch? Maybe
Yes, that was it. The Touch.
from Stan Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
felt
mean
that entire.
They actually played that a couple of times. I think
Yeah.
the one key one was when Rodimus got the was given the
Matrix.
Matrix of leadership there.
Yeah, but there was a montage to it at one point in the movie, and I'm like, this just doesn't need to be in here. This is ruining the pacing of the movie altogether.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember the. Let's see. I don't remember the exact montage you're talking about, but The Touch was I like the song The Touch myself, but
I like the song, but I don't. I'm very picky when it comes to using licensed music in movies because a lot of times it's a crutch and it doesn't actually end up helping the movie. Right? It's trying to buy your emotions cheaply without earning it through what's actually going on in the scene because you're already attached to the song.
all right. Monta. Oh, could okay, because The Touch was used a couple times. The one scene I just mentioned, and then the first time it was used was when Optimus Prime sat there, and it led into his I guess climactic battle with Megatron before they basically killed each other, where he basically ran through a bunch of Decepticons, transformed, and you see him flying over everybody, shooting everybody with his rifle. Is that what you're talking about? Maybe.
It
No,
might
he
be. I'd
said
have
on
to
that.
rewatch it to be sure. Right.
Okay.
Exactly what I'm talking about. Because like I've seen it once, and Rick, how many years ago was it that we watched it? It was like 2 or something at this point.
Yeah, at least 2 to
Yeah.
3 somewhere.
But I remember the entire time I'm watching it, like I'm just getting bogged down by the music that's in it because it just felt so out of place to me.
Uh-huh. But if you take the music away, what do you think of the movie?
I think it had potential, but taking the music away, then we'd have to do some recutting. We'd have to fill in maybe some original score in those places too. Uh,
Yeah.
I could do a recut of that movie. I think I even said at that time when we were watching it, if I had the original assets of the movie, I could do a recut of this movie that would be pretty good. Because there's a lot of scenes with potential in there. I just think it suffers from pacing issues. Things are not where they
Yeah.
need to be. There's some things that are dragged on for too long. So when they finally stop, there's almost whiplash to it that doesn't help the emotion
Yeah.
of the scene afterwards.
The other thing that might be, and it might have just too many characters in it too.
Yeah, probably. I could see
Well,
that.
why don't we get into this article and see what
Yeah.
Avi has to say here, and then you guys can comment on his criticisms because let's see. So here we go. So I've written so this is Avi speaking now. I've written a time or two before about the unsuccessful Transformers the movie cartoon from 1986.
Was
I
it
don't know.
unsuccessful? That I think it was, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it may not have been as okay. Intended by Hasbro as one of the most. Remember, this is Avi's opinion, so we don't know for certain. But intended by Hasbro as one of the most idiotic notions for how to replace their first line of toy models with a second, wasting a lot of money on a cinematic production in the process, and thought of addressing at least one more item on the subject 3 years ago. A film critic wrote about this at what to watch and how the film may have been quite a setback for how to market a movie-length cartoon where characters die. So now this is from the article he's referencing here. So
Yeah.
Hasbro had released 2 series of toys by the time Transformers the movie was released, which included 104 characters in total. The film would mark a transition for Hasbro to start using more original designs for its toys, and with so many already being used, the company decided to kill off several of the foundational characters. And of course, there was the opening scene where Ratchet, Ironhide, Brawn, and Prowl were killed.
Okay, I could tell you why they said that it was unsuccessful. The film had a budget of over $6 million in that day. The final box office gross was $5.8 million, so it didn't even make its initial budget back.
And is that just in the States or worldwide?
No, that was its final box office growth. The States alone was only 1.7 million, right? Which would be about 5.8 in today's money. And it was the 99th highest grossing film of that year. Which means there was 98 other films that released that did better than it.
What was that, Metal?
That means there's 98 other films released in the year of 1986 that did better than it.
I'm just surprised because most everybody that I know that sees it likes it for the most part. Yeah, I guess they might have criticisms like you do, but and myself, I would probably prefer it to most, if not all, of the Michael Bay ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the company decided to kill off several of. Okay, we read that part. The problem with this was first, the precedent. The Transformers syndicated series never killed off characters. And again, I see his point here because you're talking about a franchise that is being directed at kids. Okay.
Yeah.
The whole idea, and I'll get into the killing off of particularly Optimus Prime here in a bit when he gets into that and give you my take on it. Killed off and had told 65 stories that explored the identity and personalities to make even the smaller and less significant ones familiar or beloved. True. In other words, now in that reasoning right there, right? Now think about this. The G1 Transformers cartoon was made back in the 80s. You know, it originally debuted, I think, in 1984 and ran for 3 seasons. Went from 84 to 87. You had the movie here.
Technically, it was 4 seasons, but season 1 and season 4 were really short.
Yeah. Yeah, they were technically 4 seasons. You're right there. But, you know, this was being made back in the 80s there, back in the mid-80s. And, of course, at the time, you were hearing more, the term latchkey kid was coming into vogue at the time. You had some situations where you started having more single-parent homes. You started having 2-parent homes that were both working parents. So kids would, of course, be coming home. And for a lot of them, including myself, the babysitter was
being babysat by the TV.
Yeah, you know, the babysitter was the TV, basically. And so, you know, you build these characters up. Now, one of the things I've commented on this before, whenever I've talked about this series, you know, from this vantage point, too. In particular, Optimus Prime, right? The way when you looked at Optimus Prime's interaction with some of what you would call some of the quote unquote younger characters, okay, some of the younger Autobots like Bumblebee, like Sideswipe, like, you know, some of the quote unquote younger Autobots and some of the younger characters like Spike and Carly, right? One of the things I noticed as I look back, and even when I watched the movie too as well, in many ways, the way they painted Optimus Prime was almost like he was for the younger characters. He was, yeah, exactly. He was kind of a surrogate father figure. Okay. And I'll get a little bit more into this as we get into the article here and as we talk a little bit more about his death scene but basically the idea is you build these characters up, you get the fans, namely the kids, emotionally invested in these characters, and then you're killing them off in the movie. And I can see some of what, you know, Avi is saying here on that regard.
Elk says in the 1980s, Transformers didn't have a middle class audience; it was working class only. World-saving big rig trucks were scorned by the middle class school kids. Middle class embrace all of things nerdy swept in Transformers post 2000.
Metal, did you have, because I noticed you haven't said anything yet. Is there anything you want to add to the conversation at the moment here?
I'm not sure. I mean, in general, I think there needs to be more death in children's media. Not like flippantly. I mean, like actual narratively driven emotional death, because I think it's something that children are able to understand if you handle it with care, but also need to come to terms with at a very early age. I remember even some of my favorite stories have some darker elements to it when I was a kid. One of my favorite animated movies, The Brave Little Toaster, actually starts with a suicide scene.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, we'll continuing on with the article here. So let's see. But second, these story choices would likely mark the first time that child audiences that collected the toys would experience a death scene. And around that time, I'd have to kind of agree with that because here's the thing too. Ever since the 70s, the U.S. government was trying to crack down more on direct advertising towards kids, particularly with like they were not happy with shows like Transformers and G.I. Joe because they were looked at as being just a half-hour commercial, basically. You know,
yeah.
I know.
I'm trying to think. 86, I was 12 or 13, depending on the time of the year. I'm trying to think whether I had watched anything with a death scene in it by that time. I think I knew, obviously, I'd been confronted with
I
death.
don't think
or
there
for
were
a
there
better
were
way.
a whole lot. There were probably very few, if any.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that
I'm
becomes more
thinking for
popular
more
in the
than just
90s.
cartoons. I'm just thinking for more than just cartoons, stuff that I might have been able to see. Like I know I would have seen Jedi or Star Wars, would have seen Star Trek for sure. Um, by that point too, there's a couple death scenes I think in with those ones maybe.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to think. I can't remember
Wrath of
fully
Khan has a
all.
great death scene for children to understand the cost of death.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think I would have seen probably Wrath of Khan by then because I forget what year it came out offhand. Probably would have seen that in theaters with my mom.
Yeah, the Wrath of Khan, I think, came out sometime in the early '80s. I think. Um,
Probably, right, because it's the second one, and didn't the first one come out in like 80 or 81?
Something like that. Yeah, but
I thought the first one came out in like '79, the
uh,
'70s,
I guess I'll just look that up.
late '70s. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
the
I
first one
might
was
have seen
79.
some. So I might have seen some death, but then again, I was 13, 12 or
And Wrath
13.
of Khan
So
was 82.
Yeah, that's what I
so
thought, and I just saw that too. I just looked that up real quick. Yeah, so
So 82, I would have been 9. I would have seen that in theaters. I saw number 1 in theaters. I'm pretty sure I would have saw number 2 in theaters. I don't remember one way or another for sure. But, my mom was into Star Wars. We did see number 1 in theaters. But it's hard to say because where we were living at the time, we didn't have access to. Uh, there was city transit, but it didn't run. Wasn't decently running where we were living. But I don't know. Anyways, go on.
all right, all right. So let me get that. Okay, so certainly Disney had ventured into darker territory in the late 1970s, early 80s with its storytelling. And there were some live action films like E.T. that skillfully navigated perilous scenarios for their characters, but arrived at safer, happier places by the end. In fact, if I remember correct, you were talking about the Brave Little Toaster medal, and I believe that was a Disney movie. I believe.
I don't think so. I think that's it was one of their competitors.
Oh,
I could look. It definitely
But
wasn't their main line. If it was something, it would have been like an offshoot, like Touchstone. Let me look. It's distributed by Walt Disney, but I know that wasn't the main. It was under Hyperion Pictures at the time,
all right.
which
yeah,
Disney owns. Yeah, so it was
But
not a mainline Disney product.
no. But
the only thing I'll say here about safer, happier place in the end. Well, maybe Optimus doesn't come back or whatever, but at the end it is a happy. It's a happy movie. The Autobots win and all that, right? So they take out the
uh,
bad guy.
well, let's just continue on with the article here. But even or especially 35 years later, Optimus Prime's death remains an astonishing spectacle in a cartoon clearly made for kids that looks a little more polished than the series it was based upon, but for the most part duplicated its colors, its lighting, and its tone. Now, again,
All
the
movies are
reason
better. Sorry.
well, I wanted to get to this part because this is one of the points I was going to make here with this particular. I think the reason that Optimus Prime's death hit so hard was because, as I pointed out earlier, for younger characters, for younger people, right, for kids, he was kind of their surrogate father figure. So, in a way, his death scene would have been kind of like in a way, like watching your own father pass away. You
Yeah.
know, and I think in many ways that's what may have got a lot of people upset is exposing kids to that kind of thing, because I think they even mention it here as we continue on here. I remember being shocked as a kid just that the characters used profanity for the first time, the what we mentioned earlier, but it was nothing short of devastating to watch Prime lay on a cold slab as his vitals slow to a flat line, the blue glow of his eyes flicker out, and his body turns gray. Now I can see his point. I can see the author's point there in that
Yeah.
again, it's kind of like the idea of exposing your kids to like the experience of what would happen if like kind of watching
Yeah.
your dad die there. Now,
Yeah.
I have a feeling after reading this that Metal. Do you have anything you want to say on?
Well, I kind of agree. I think in this case it is more of like the whiplash of the tone change, I guess, from the series it came from to the movie, right? Because there are
Yeah.
a lot of movies I like from that time, animations, are even without the overly dramatic Optimus death scene, uh, in many ways darker than that movie, right? Like The Secret of Nim came out before that, which is a arguably darker movie with even the themes that it handles, also based off of the book that was darker. But it didn't come from this franchise that was pretty bright and heroic, and the heroes always save the day at the end. Like there's this like tonal whiplash to the movie compared to where it came from.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, most movies that come from a TV series, it's themes. A lot of the stuff has changed or whatever. Like I know this was years later, but if you take, Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, when they went and did their first in theater movies, you know, everything was upgraded to make it
Yeah,
look a
yeah,
hell of a lot better.
yeah.
Oh,
I don't think the tone
so
was too much different. In fact, a lot of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, while it did have its serious moments, did play up the humor with Ivan
yeah,
News, which I love that movie. But I also have to
yeah,
think, even with that, it's a precedent that was set from earlier films like this. So we have to look at this film as the precedent and not with it already being around.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was just using that one because it's one I could think of offhand. I'm sure there's probably other stuff from earlier, but I don't know offhand. You know, um, but then again, well, Star Trek Two, although Star Trek's not really a kid thing, Star Trek Two, the motion picture, they up the production value too. Everything when you're going for a movie, you get up production value.
Well, I'm not
So
talking about production
of
value. I'm
course,
talking about the tone of the series,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well,
So,
I
like,
guess I'm just more commenting. He said that
yeah,
things look more polished than the series. It was based on for parts that were most part it was duplicated. Its colors, lighting, but everything gets more production value. You know, in a movie because they got more money to spend.
I think Star Trek is one of the perfect examples because most people don't like Star Trek the motion picture, the first one. And tonally, it was kind of different from the show. The follow up movies after that, Wrath of Khan, which is praised as one of the best in the series, is tonally closer to the show than the first movie was.
Yeah, Captain
Yeah,
Vinity said production value. So, um,
yeah. So
all right.
and that was just my comment based on the more polished thing that he said, or whoever said.
Mhm.
Anyways, I guess go
I
on.
think they're basing it on the article that Avi is referencing here, I believe. All right, so with a future toy line to showcase, Prime wasn't the only Transformer who died in the film, and he wasn't even the first. In an opening scene, Megatron and the Decepticons intersect. I think it's supposed to be intercept not intersect, but intersect an Autobot shuttle, and they do everything to its crew except take prisoners. Yeah, there's another very infamous incident that people have talked about too, and I think they may. And later, Megatron and a few of his henchmen suffer a fate. Okay, so before I continue with that, so the scene I'm talking about is, even though it happened kind of off camera, as it were, it seemed like they do make it look like Megatron literally sat there and shot Ironhide's head clear off. You know, you see Ironhide crawling, saying no, and then Megatron saying "sentimental fool" or something like that, and then point his guns down on him, and like the implication is he just shot his head off. But anyway,
Captain says for comic books that means hiring a good artist. Rebellious Pastry is here, and Rebellious says, "Hail, hello, Rebellious, how are you doing?" Captain says, "Pastry, just listen to you on Jay's channel." Rebellious says, "I am here from Lorenzo's." And the Metal says, Captain, it means hiring Dillard." And it says, "Hey to Pastry."
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the show, Pastry. Hopefully, stick around, enjoy the show, and as always, first off, if you guys haven't already, if you guys can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, Timothy's here. Hey, Tim.
Hey, what's up?
Not much. Let me at least get finished with these, and then
the sky is up.
Yep. Oh, the cover for Melvin 2 special edition just got finished.
All right, that's cool.
Let me share it at least.
All right. Well, hold on. Let me at least get through these real quick, and then let me cut the article off there for a moment, and then I'll give you a chance to. Let's see. The metal. Sure. That is precisely why the artist on Captain Infinity is John Dillard. And then, all right. So now with that, let me just stop share screen for a moment. Okay, if you want to. All right.
Oh yes, I had John Dillard as an artist for a few covers of Melvin, which actually is the cover for Melvin Special Edition 1. This is Special Edition number Melvin 2 Special Edition, which is done by Rob Ewing.
All right. Well, Captain Minute just said everyone's here now, so all right. So Tim, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, pretty good.
All right. So, do you are you aware of what we're going over right now? We're going over an article about Transformers the movies. Did you catch any of our conversation yet?
No.
Okay. What a joke. Okay. All right. Well, basically, Avi Green from Bleeding Pool did an article. I covered it the other day, where he said that he basically gave some pretty harsh critique on Transformers the movie, the G1 movie back in '86, and we're just kind of going over that now. Discussing certain things where, like, why the movie was unsuccessful, why people criticize it, and it looks like you have another thing you want to share. Okay?
Yeah. Well, continue what you're saying. We can wait.
Well, I pretty much finished for the moment, so.
Okay. Well, I think Transformers the movie is a classic. It actually stood up better than G.I. Joe the movie, which was terrible actually.
Metal, do you want to tell Tim what you discovered a few minutes ago?
That I discovered? Oh, are you talking about the box office?
Yes.
Because a lot of people aren't aware of this. That Transformers, the movie, was a commercial failure that didn't even make its budget back. Because its budget was a little over $6 million in the day. But total, even outside of the States, because the States was only like 1.7 or 8 million, the total was like 5.8 million that it made back. So it didn't even make its budget, let alone anything else it had to do for marketing on top of that.
Do you think it paid off over time though?
Probably. I think what it probably paid off more was as an advertisement for the toy sales, because at that point you could start selling Unicron, who was a very expensive toy that cost way more than it did to produce it.
Okay, that's fair enough. So this is a page for Melvin 4.
That looks. Is that inked already?
It's I think it's just penciled, or I don't know if he inked it.
That looks inked.
But
Yeah, I
before
know.
you, Tim,
I've heard that
sorry.
before.
Tim, I'm sorry. Quick thing for a moment here. So Restless Pastry and Captain Finity, I guess, want to join in. Do you? Well, I know. So Captain Finity is from your channel, right?
He's just gonna come on and argue.
Huh?
Captain Finity is from several people's channels.
He's got his own channel.
And yes, he's got his own channel as well. But Mike just gives out the channels through Facebook. That's all he's got for things. So unless you want to join him through Facebook,
Yeah, well,
because I don't think you really want to put
No, I'm not here to argue with him
chat.
either. If he's going to come on here and argue, I'm not interested in that. He blasted me because I made a joke on Admiral Teague's channel in the chat, which was a joke, and he's taken, and he's also insulted the artwork to my book, and I'm not going to put up with it. I worked hard on what I accomplished. So
it sounds like if I was to let them on, it sounds like, well, which one are you talking about, Finity, or are you talking about
Finity? He sits there and he complains about people. That's all his shows are about, is complaining about people. I'm not interested in that.
We do try to, and just for those who are in the chat right now, we do try to be a drama-free channel here. You got too many YouTubers already who like sit there and feed off drama like it's candy, and we just.
I also, reading the chat, don't think Finity had intention of coming on. He was asking for the link just to see how Tim would respond.
Okay. All right. So, anyway,
Elk says so. The studio didn't make half of its budget, as the studio only kept half of the box office, and the promotion budget for the film can be half the production budget.
All right. I just wanted to see how. So yeah, you were right there.
Well, Menno had already read that. That's why he said it, I believe.
Okay. But I felt I needed to make the drama speech there just so people were clear.
There, and that ends that.
So, anyways, let me at least finish highlighting these for people, and then we'll.
Just as long as you don't bury the hatchet in somebody's back.
Yeah. So, anyways, was there anything else you wanted to share? Was there anything else you wanted to share before we go back to what we were doing, Tim?
No.
All right.
I'm going to pull up.
Metal wanted to say something.
Yeah. Because I was being pretty critical towards the movie earlier, which I think my critique is fair, because I'm looking at it. I'm trying to critique it as a film and not just like, oh, it's a part of Transformers. I do want to give it some praise. I did think the animation, especially compared to the series it came from, but I thought the animation for the time was pretty stellar, right? Even just comparing it to, maybe not the Don Bluth films, but I mean, Don Bluth was blowing everybody away in the animation, but comparing it to some like the Disney films at the time, or even some of the other big animated films that might come out after it, like Heavy Metal, I thought it was pretty good.
Pastry says Metal and Cross can vouch for me. Yeah, I say we can. In the positive light.
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's get back
But
to
as I said, you only give out the thing through Facebook, so
yeah.
unless somebody has
Well,
Facebook and
well,
wants to
sometimes
give their
like in other words, I would trust your I would trust your judgment. So usually I will give it out through Facebook because that's usually that's how I contact people. But like if
yeah.
if I and I guess I won't now because with what Tim just said, but if let's say Captain Infinity and Paisley did want to really come on and want to be part of the conversation and contribute, then I would give Rick and or Metal permission to share the link with them through whatever sources they can contact them through them. I've done that before. I've done that with RJ before as well. Sometimes,
Yeah.
granted, I prefer to hand out the links myself, and I don't want to just open it up. And Rick, you know full well why I don't want to just open up the link. Because
Yeah.
what
I
could
get.
happen?
You just don't want to put that link. You
No,
don't want to put the
from
link
the
in the
past.
chat just
Yeah,
because.
so
Not that rebellious or captain is a problem, but you never know who else might click that link in the chat
right.
that
So,
you don't see in the
anyway,
chat.
Anyways, I think we've talked enough about drama. I think we've talked.
Yeah.
Enough about
Let's get
drama.
on with
Yep.
let's get on with the
Let's get back
article.
to the article here. Okay, so with a future toy line to showcase. Prime wasn't the we already got through that. Let's see. Oh, and Megatron and a few of his henchmen suffer a fate similar to his iconic adversary, but they almost immediately transformed into their next generation versions, where by comparison, moviegoers get to watch Optimus Prime, quote, soul leave his body, unquote, as director Shin described it. Yeah, and my particular take on that was in terms of Optimus Prime's death, is for those who missed my discussion on it earlier, was because of the fact that many kids grew up watching Transformers, and in many ways how they depicted Prime's interaction with some of the younger Autobots and younger Transformers and younger characters. He was kind of like a surrogate father figure. So his death scene, I think, was particularly damaging because it was, in essence, kind of like watching your own father die. So
Yeah, possible. Anyways,
I do think though bringing him back was like also his sacrifice was for nothing. He just come back.
Well, that was later in the last episode of the second season there.
In a roundabout way, they kind of made him Jesus. Think about it. He sacrificed himself.
I think that was intentional.
I thought it was because they got a lot of letters complaining about it.
Well, yeah, that was true. That was true too, because actually, and I think they made that mention here too. So it subsequently came as little surprise that critics were either baffled or appalled by the film, which they characterized as a feature-length toy ad, which of course it was. But what's more unexpected is how unprepared the storytellers were to the very thing that Tim just mentioned, to the backlash that ensued by killing off these iconic characters, starting with children themselves, and inevitably moving on to parents furious about having to console or explain mortality after taking their children to the feature-length toy ad.
Well, I mean, I kind of liked how ruthless Megatron was. I mean, that was a villain right there.
Well, one of the things I mentioned a few minutes ago, Tim, was in like one of the first scenes in the movie. You had a scene there where, even though it was done kind of off screen, you actually saw what looked like Megatron quite almost literally blow Ironhide's head off.
Well, he shot him clear on the ground. He shot him while he was on the ground. Yeah, that's cold blooded. That's a villain right there. That's just my opinion.
Anyway, I'm things are getting a little dim in here, so I got to make some lighting adjustments here. So I'll be right back. I'm going to turn on the light. I'm going to go up.
Don't you think so, Metal?
What was that?
What's that noise?
Oh,
I have
that's
no clue.
that is
Garage.
the garage door opening underneath me.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So don't you think
Uh,
that made Megatron actually a better villain? That he was
Oh
just
yeah,
so
yeah. I do.
also that he was just ruthless.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was even saying earlier before you came in that I think children actually can handle death very well as long as
yeah,
you handle it with care, right? Like you give like these powerful narrative, emotional deaths. You're not just like flippantly running around killing things willy nilly.
yeah. But there's the thing I was going to say. Depending on how old the kid, I would hope before, not because of this movie, of course, but before you have even had taken your kid to a movie, if they're like 5, that you might have explained mortality in a tactful manner by this time. Because
Well,
unfortunately
fiction's actually
people
typically
die.
how you explain mortality to kids, right? Like even going back, that's why we have like fairy tales and stuff.
Megatron,
Oh,
Tim.
right, Megatron. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. My theory, and this is just kind of a, I think you could easily say that Megatron was holding back all those years and decided, hell with it, kill them all.
Well, with that movie, you figure you can get away with a little bit more than the Saturday morning cartoon or weekday afternoon cartoon.
Yeah. Well, I
Well, yeah,
mean,
you don't have the same restrictions that the TV ratings do. Like,
no.
the whole movie and TV rating system's different. How you have to treat what they say is practically ads were different too on movies and TV. They could definitely get away with more stuff in the theater.
I think they made fun of that kind of stuff on the show Community, where
Yeah.
Jeff Winger's his coma world, is the world he retreated into in his coma, was a GI Joe episode, and they could only lay down the suppressive fire, and they were court-martialed for brutal violence, suggestive language, unbecoming of a GI Joe.
Yeah. Well, speaking of GI Joe, as we'll continue the article here, kind of an interesting segue there, Tim. GI Joe the movie followed soon after. In fact, it was supposed to be released first, but production delays held up, and the box office failure of Transformers the movie prompted them to rejigger it for direct to video. For those obstacles ended up giving the production time to react to the criticism of Transformers. In particular, viewers' profound disappointment that a beloved character died.
And the other thing that I wanted to say,
Yeah, they
like
handled that
anybody,
perfectly.
nobody could have predicted that people would have been outraged that the main hero of the story got killed.
Well, as I said, I felt like with how they portrayed Optimus for much of that time and how they
But
treated him as kind of like the surrogate father figure, I think you get kids very emotionally invested into these characters, and you do something like it, it's going to have a profound effect.
Yeah, but forgetting all that aspect, you kill off the main character of the
Optimus Prime
franchise.
the main character?
Well, he's the main hero. He's the leader, right?
Right.
Everything revolves around him or Megatron. It's you. Transformers is really just about him and Megatron. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other people, and sometimes they focus on them. But most of the time, it's about Megatron and Optimus. So they kill him off. You're not expecting outrage from kids and people. Forget whether they think of him as a father figure. Just there is going to be outrage. It's like, to me, it just makes the most sense.
Yeah. They had similarly embarked on a throat-clearing exercise with G.I. Joe with the plan to kill off none other than Duke. Yeah, and I heard about this too. Duke, who was, again, maybe didn't have quite the same emotional connection to the characters that Prime did, but again, was somebody who was pretty prevalent in the first 2 seasons there.
I've been watching I haven't made it through a lot, but I've been watching a little bit of G.I. Joe recently, and he's not as prevalent as
Prime was. Yeah.
Prime. With G.I. Joe, they focus more on the whole team, where, I think they focus a little bit more on Prime and Megatron in the things because they are the leader.
Effectively the
In
main
fact,
character of the series, but yeah.
in fact, in G.I. Joe, Cobra Commander gets a little bit more attention than any of the particular Joes, in my opinion. And Alpha Proto says in the G.I. Joe movie, Zarana was going to have a topless scene, but censor said that would be too much. They could get out of that or the blood. They chose blood when Duke was put in a coma. Duke is a strong character, but there are a lot of other authority figures in G.I. Joe besides Duke, like Flint, Major Hawk, and Sergeant
actually, it
Slaughter.
was General Hawk in the show, not Major, but and Sergeant Slaughter. And of course, Sergeant Slaughter was actually based on real life professional wrestler Sergeant Slaughter, Robert Remus.
Yeah, I didn't know that
who
until
is
years later.
still living as the character to this day. You can interact with him directly on Twitter.
Yeah. I think he follows me, or I follow him, or something.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. But so the funny thing about G.I. Joe is that it wasn't just the Transformers movies failure that made it go direct to video. There was another failure by the same studio and company that happened right at the same time as Transformers, and they're like, yeah, we're not doing the theater release anymore. And it was the My Little Pony movie, which also was a big failure. So they're like, 2 failures? No, we can't deal with a third. Direct to video. We're good.
Here's a question: did the Transformers movie do better on video, though?
Probably over the years, yeah.
Those records aren't as easy to track as the box office, right? Especially because it's over years. Like, a lot of companies don't release all of that. You'd have to like actually look at their financial reports year after year and add it up yourself.
Yeah, because I kind of think that the Transformers movie is loved more now than it was back then.
Probably. Well, I would take that bet.
It's one of those things that probably most likely would have developed a cult following, because I actually have a copy of it, of the movie.
Same here.
I'd say as a kid, though, watching it, it didn't really affect me, I guess. I just thought it was just a great movie. I liked it. Hey, there's Transformers! Yeah. Yay! Just Transformers in general. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. I thought it was a pretty good movie too as a kid, But then again, I've been taught about death and all that. I can't exactly remember precisely what I would have thought of Prime's death, but I probably would have thought it sucked for sure.
At least they didn't stick with at least they didn't stick with the original script. That was weird.
The original
I've never seen that.
The original script was going. I think one of the original ideas was that Wheeljack and RC were going to have a relationship, and there was something about like there was this planet with this the planet. I think I have to look it up, but the planet was called something, and then oh god dang it! Why did I have to pick now to have a brain fart?
I don't know.
Well, it's just that there's like a planet with a species that lives.
Okay, Amir.
Well,
did Tim Rowe there, or was
they did introduce the Junkions in the movie?
Is this me? I'm not hearing people.
I can hear you, Rick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, maybe it was just nobody was talking.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I think we all. Tim, can you hear me?
Because in the middle of what Tim was saying,
yes,
it went
hold
out.
on. So, I'm actually looking up the original script. They had a. So I can find that video.
I think we all were wondering what's going on there.
Just continue talking. I'm looking at it.
Well, he's in finding that. How about we start finishing off the script because it's almost 6:45. So.
Yeah. All right. So, let's see, where were we? Oh yeah, kill off none other than Duke, effectively the main character in the series. In the film, Duke is seriously wounded and goes into a coma. But because of Transformers, the movie, uncredited screenwriter Buzz Dixon created replacement dialogue after what was supposed to be his death scene, which is still in the film. The first indicates he has gone into a coma, and later that he successfully recovered from it, though he is never seen again. I think the movie was, unlike with the Transformers movie, G.I. Joe movie was kind of the end until Deke came out with their version. I don't think they were part of the same universe though. After that,
no. There was stuff right after GI Joe the movie because they showed stuff with Serpentor as the leader.
Well,
of the
that might have been the Deke series though, but I think from the original Real American, because I think Arise Serpent, the third season of, like, okay, so the chronology was Transformers had season 1, season 2, then the movie, then season 3, and season 4.
Yeah.
Chronology for G.I. Joe was season The Mass Device, Revenge of Cobra, season 1, then the movie. Wait, actually no. Then season 3, which was the Serpentor one, where they created Serpentor and you had Dr. Mindbender and a bunch of new characters there.
Yeah, but I remember Serpentor coming in. I remember Serpentor coming in the movie.
I shared it.
It's already been created though. Serpentor. The thing, what they revealed in G.I. Joe the movie was that it was actually Globulus who basically, however you want to figure it out, it was Globulus who actually put the idea of Serpentor into Mindbender's head, because Mindbender, back in the 5-parter Arise Serpentor Arise, that's when Serpentor was created. And
okay. Anyway, Tim shared the link to what video he was talking about.
It's about the original draft of the Transformers movie script and all the rewrites.
I'll check.
It's actually rather interesting. I wish we had time to actually go over the video.
How long is it? Oh, we don't have time, obviously, but I might watch it later.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's try and get through this script or this article.
Yeah. So, anyways, okay. So after that, very few children's-oriented stories even went near topics like death. Although, of course, they were willing to explore war, violence, and destruction. Pain and fear were systematically eliminated as tools, much less consequences, for characters in kids' shows and movies, unless they were used in the service of telling some sort of lesson, especially in animation. When you watch a younger character get subjected to some form of violence, their reaction is almost invariably one of indifference and often of enjoyment. In an early scene in the Angry Birds movie, for example, Red punts a little blue bird who disturbed his sleep into the ocean. And the film makes a special effort to indicate that the little bird enjoyed the experience. Even where the character's aggression is the cornerstone of the plot, the recipient of his rage is unbothered and even delighted by how he expresses it. And the original Despicable Me works overtime to highlight just how much fun Gru's orphans are having at all times, no matter what sort of dangerous scenario.
What kind of article is this?
It's also like cherry picking to be factually wrong, because people didn't avoid death. Like I said, even after this, Brave Little Toaster came out like the year after Transformers. There's a death scene at the very beginning of the thing. Don Bluth really didn't avoid death if it made sense for the story. At the very beginning of The Land Before Time, which I believe happened in like '89, Littlefoot's like mother is dead.
Also, I want to point out.
No,
I want to point out something.
Land Before
notable.
Time would have happened before then, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to point out something.
Sorry.
Mankind has enjoyed violent entertainment since forever. So why is all of a sudden that we act like, oh man, all of a sudden this modern entertainment is full of violence? Like, well, we've always enjoyed watching death and violence. So why is this any different? It's made up, but it's fictionalized death and violence.
Yeah, compared to like the
you're
Roman
right.
Colosseums.
I was off by
Yeah.
1 year. It was Land Before Time was '88, but I was
Yeah.
pretty close.
Oh, okay.
Call
I
it the
thought it was even
Colosseum.
earlier than that.
People liked watching people die for real in ancient Rome. So why all of a sudden are we acting like,
Well, for the okay, so Don Bluth learned or
Leaned.
into
Leaned.
those, but okay, but to answer your question, for this particular scenario situation, Tim, because your point is valid. Okay, yeah, you're right. There does seem to be, unfortunately, there does seem to be a certain element within the human condition where we do unfortunately take pleasure in the suffering of others. Okay.
in this case, it would be fictional characters that don't exist in reality.
Yeah, but the thing, I think for this particular situation, I think it's
They're
some ways
talking about
a matter
kids.
of exposing kids to such a thing in such a way that they feel would traumatize them.
Yeah,
No.
but I could be wrong, of course, but
I
don't
was never
think I am.
traumatized by any of that stuff, and I watched the same stuff as y'all.
Yeah, and I wasn't either. And I think those of us in here, but
Yeah.
But if you
No,
go back to what the article is talking about when they're criticizing the death of Optimus Prime too, right there, right?
Yeah.
What we were talking about before. Okay, the point I had made about that was that you have kids, a lot of them where their parents were working class or single parent homes, for the kids would where the TV would become their babysitter in essence. For a lot of kids, they would become emotionally invested in these fictional characters. Okay.
Yeah.
And as such, and one of the ways I talked about with Optimus Prime, for example, with how he was characterized, okay, for his interactions with many of the younger characters was that as a surrogate father figure. And so when it came to the movie, and they came to watching Optimus Prime. It may not have been the case for you or me or Rick or anybody here, but there were probably kids out there who, for whatever reason, because maybe they did get emotionally attached to the character, it was kind of like seeing their own father get killed.
Yeah. But what I was going to say about kids and the violence is, we were talking about the Roman Colosseum. I'm sure parents bring their kids to see that.
Yeah, then. They did.
Also, the Roman Colosseums weren't quite like what happened in there wasn't quite what you think it is, right? There's been a lot of Hollywood changing how people perceive what actually happened with gladiating. Right, there were certain times and eras where it was actually violent, depending on who the emperor was who was abusing it. But for most of it, even though a lot of gladiators were slaves, it wasn't like the way we look at slavery in recent history, because Roman slavery was just very different. These were just basically like an underclass of people, and most of gladiating was closer to what we see as like professional wrestling now. Hardly anybody died if it wasn't by accident. People had their favorite champions. In fact, you would probably peeve a lot of people if you were to just execute their favorite person right there on the spot.
Right. But they did execute them for the amusement of the crowd, though.
Yeah, but only during the times where you had like particularly pernicious rulers. It was not a very common thing.
All right. So Alpha Proto is saying honestly, sports reenact the Coliseum experiences without the death. For some reason, it just took a few centuries for people to figure that out.
Yeah, like where most of the death actually happened. You're talking about things that were killed for pleasure. It was mostly animals, right? Like they would bring in live animals to fight, which still the people would win like 99% of the time because you have people with like spears fighting an animal that can't fight a spear, right? You would kill like cougars and stuff like that. That's what most of the death in the
lions and
Colosseum was.
bears.
And the Elk at
Okay.
Antioch is making a good point too here. This is back in the 1980s when more than half the kids had relationships with their fathers.
This is true.
You know,
Yeah. Alpha also said the thing is they think pleasure is learned, so they want films to avoid giving children exposure to it.
Yeah. To me, like, have these sanitizing entertainment is a way of control.
well, and that's why we look at these articles, Tim, to go through them and to analyze them and point some of this stuff out. That's the whole point about these discussions, right? It's to not just to inform, but to make you think. You know. So,
Hopefully, anyways.
Yeah.
Let's make
So
this thing.
real quick too about the gladiating thing. Talking about original scripts is actually funny. The original script for the movie Gladiator was going to be a lot more historically accurate, and it was going to be more of a sports type movie than anything that followed how gladiating was. And the production company rejected it, and that's why we got the movie we got instead.
They made it more epic then.
Yeah, and they went with like what the public notions of gladiating was, which a lot of it came from how Spartacus was made, even though that was like decades before.
Although Comicus was also the emperor that would mark the end of Rome, and I guess he wasn't really that well liked.
Yeah, but surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of gladiator murder during his time.
All right. So, anyways, finishing off this portion. So, what sort of dangerous scenario his choices might have landed them all in? So now we're getting back to Avi here speaking, I believe. So, not the other article that Avi's referring, but now Avi's speaking here. I think some of the biggest mistakes, while nothing new, are how these American-made cartoons keep getting marketed almost wholesale for children's consumption. Or for children under 16, say, and while death is one thing, the alarmingly nasty way some of the robots were junked was clearly too much even for a PG-rated cartoon. Whose other grievous error was that it didn't stand on its own, and the slaughters were for commercial reasons, not artistic ones. You guys have anything you want to say on that portion of what we just read?
In retrospect, it's a good film. I can't help but say that.
Yeah.
And, maybe it wasn't for artistic ones or commercial, but a lot of things happen for various reasons in movies.
And maybe as to Tim's point earlier, maybe that's part of the reason why this may have become somewhat of a cult classic. Aside from the fact that people who grew up watching the Transformers cartoon, obviously wanting to have the full universe, involved, but also, maybe because of the taboo that was put onto this film in particular, right?
I would have to say also the soundtrack was pretty good. I mean, I'm not big on hair metal,
which is my biggest complaint in the movie.
I know, but
which is why
I like the soundtrack too. I mean, the Touch is a cool song.
I like the songs in the soundtrack. If I were to listen to the soundtrack on its own, I like it. I don't like its use in the movie is the problem.
You don't think Megatron gunning down all those Autobots in that ship to that heavy metal song wasn't awesome?
No, that one I think fit. My bigger
Yeah.
problem is that I don't think all of the music was chosen specifically for artistic reasons. I think it was chosen to buy emotion without earning it. Right? Because you're already attached to the song. So you're going to just start getting the emotion from the song instead of the scene itself. And I was watching it pretty critically. The scenes weren't as heavy as the music emotionally.
All right. So, anyways, continuing on here. Let's see. Where are you? I'm sure some people who'd seen it came to wonder if the toy makers were desensitized to violence. And the mistake the filmmakers made was assuming that. Because these are robots awaiting the curtain call, they could get away with visiting jarring violence upon them. As the resulting failure and angry reactions of parents at the time made clear, that's awfully naive thinking on the producer's part. See, and that's one of the things I think I was even somewhat alluding
Well,
to.
I'm not sure it's so much the violence.
They thought these were robots, and therefore they didn't think that the kids might have had might have gotten some kind of emotional attachment to them. And from what we saw, they did. Right?
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, it's just you're killing off like one of the main characters of it, the heroes. Of course, people are going to be mad. You'd be just dumb not to think about that. Now, just for the violence, I wouldn't care about that. I don't. Some parents would. I know some would. And of course, Alpha says the Transformers movie would have stood alone better if it explained the Cybertron war before starting the film. If you didn't watch this, then you would be lost.
I also
Maybe,
would,
yeah.
I would also say they should have aired Scramble City, which was an unaired episode of Transformers before the movie came out, because it explains. I think at the end of the episode they were talking about establishing bases on the moons of Cybertron at the end of it, and they didn't air it.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's considered canon, though. That was part of it.
Actually,
well, it's not considered canon.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
Well, it did introduce some of the combiners that we all know of now.
Yeah.
It
would have been canon if it.
Sorry.
If it ever aired.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say if it would have been canon if it aired, but unfortunately it wasn't, so it's not. And then just Alpha Proto says, yeah, it's dramatic to kill a character you have been following for years, similar to Game of Thrones effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's if it doesn't air, but it still ties into events and could possibly explain something, then at best it's apocryphal.
Oh, okay, so in Scramble City, they actually introduced Ultra Magnus, Ratbat, Ramhorn, Steeljaw, Metroplex, and Triptychon, which would have probably helped with some of the continuity.
Possibly, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So some disgust can also be leveled at Marvel's 3-part adaptation of the movie, which saw Ultra Magnus get dismembered by Megatron turned Galvatron henchman, even if he was repaired shortly after by Wreck-Gar and his quote-unquote tribe. What if any children who'd read that scene were traumatized by that too? Just because that was comics, as opposed. Okay, so I guess what they're talking about is the Marvel comic adaptation of the movie. I'm guessing.
Well, then they should probably read the further issues of the of the actual Transformers comic book series that Marvel did because they kind of went their own way.
Yeah.
They had things like
Oh,
Megatron
the,
and Ratchet getting melted together, and they kind of shared the same mind or something. So whatever
the
Megatron
whole.
felt,
Go ahead, Tim.
whatever Megatron felt, Ratchet would also feel.
Now, I was going to say the whole, except for the adaptation of the movie, the whole Transformers series by Marvel was completely different than the TV series.
Yeah.
Right.
Even
Well,
had,
and in many ways, a lot of times, yeah. From what I understand, comics at times will go in another route. They develop their own especially when you're adapting other properties like that. Sometimes they will go their own route. Let's see. Captain Infinity said, apart from Lady Stoneheart in the books, of course. So,
I mean, he even had a panel in one of the Transformers comic books where Starscream was ripping wires out of his own arm.
Yeah, I have most of the original Marvel line of comic books for Transformers.
You remember when they were doing the battle with Unicron in the Transformers series, and that one headmaster got stabbed through the gut by
Not
Unicron's
offhand.
by Unicron's fingernail, and then he ate him.
was that that was I take it that was a comic.
Not offhand.
There's a comic book, yeah. So it was a Marvel. They introduced Unicron differently, and Galvatron was like from the future or something, and he time traveled back to that time period or something. They introduced Galvatron differently.
So, anyways, just because that was comics as opposed to a cartoon proper is no excuse. As I now recall, while Spike, Witwicky, and Bumblebee may have survived in the movie, in the comic miniseries they did not. Recalling that was where they got sucked into Unicron and never reappeared for the remainder of the story. In other words, a very slapdash form of difference between comic and cartoon that made the Marvel miniseries all the more tasteless and pointless.
Tasteless?
This is Avi's opinion here. This is not mine. I'm just covering it. I'm just reading what he's saying. If you have an issue with what he's saying, you're welcome to articulate that here.
Take it up with him.
Yeah, I mean, and while I do appreciate that one of their producers, Ron Friedman, tried to talk Hasbro executives out of killing off Optimus at the time, something that's unclear in hindsight is whether Friedman extended the same defense to at least a few other Autobots who were dumped on the scrap pile during Megatron's attack on the craft. Ironhide, Ratchet, Brawn, and Prowl, for example. Sure, it was in very poor taste to kill Optimus, but that doesn't mean the lower ranking are expendable. And Ironhide may have suffered the worst fate, a worse fate than Optimus did. Those Autobots slain in the movie may have been resurrected since the turn of the century, especially when new comics continuities were established.
But none of those other ones' death would be as dramatic as Optimus died. That's why the guy would have went for him and not the others.
Right. Well, again, back to my original point in the beginning. But anyway, but if Friedman did nothing to defend them back in the day as he did Optimus, that's decidedly pathetic. I will say, though, it's pretty flattering a villain like Starscream was kept in the electronic afterlife for some reason. You guys remember Starscream's ghost, right? Yeah.
It's not some reason, it's some time. Afterlife for some time.
Oh, for some time. Recalling he reappeared as a ghost in the TV cartoon's third season. But for those Autobots who perished in the shoddy 1986 movie, did they ever have the same privilege of returning as Robo-Phantoms? Probably not.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
of course not. Like, if you actually pay attention to the canon, Starscream is explained that his spark actually cannot die, so he just kind of, that's why he becomes a Phantom. He's different than most other people.
Yeah, and he also appears, I think, in the first season of Transformers Beast Wars.
Yeah, like he
that
literally
spark.
has like an immortal spark. So if he loses his body, he's just stuck as a spark floating around. He can project as a ghost and stuff. And this has been canon to the series for a really long time.
And that's decidedly problematic. A rank-and-file robot can't be considered any less valuable than the team leader. And this point is firmly valid for human and humanoid characters in pop culture too.
Okay, I know it's not exactly everybody's sort of equal, but even in a war, if you lose the general, people care more about that than losing, your average.
If you lose the guy who makes the
rank and
plans and
file.
does the order, everything falls apart. Like, people can't. There's certain levels of things that people on the ground can do, right? They can decide. But that falls apart when you go anything past guerrilla warfare, anything that actually needs formations and complex strategy, everything just falls apart. And a lot of people look up to their commanders for morale. Like, some people just quit after the commander's gone.
Yeah, so killing off they could kill off every other Autobot except for maybe Bumblebee, and everybody would have been fine with that.
Yeah, well, because I think in the case of Bumblebee, whereas if Optimus was the surrogate father figure, Bumblebee was the surrogate little brother figure. If you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, and I noticed Tim's in an interesting conversation with Captain Finity there.
Oh, I was just doing some reading.
Huh.
Anyway, continue.
All right. More recently, last year, a writer at Fatherly tried to argue in the movie's favor, which I honestly can't bring myself to do, based on how forced the whole project looks to me. Yet, they do have something eyebrow-raising to say regarding the issue of human parenthood. And this is from the article that he's referencing. In parentheses, also, where's Daniel's other parent? Was there a mom? Another dad? Someone else? Was Spike a single? No! Okay,
well,
and
no,
when I saw this, I jumped on this because no. It's pretty much implied, and then they later did address this in the third season there, that Carly was Daniel's mother. It could have been it could have been implied if granted, maybe it wasn't picked up if you never watched the cartoon, but considering that towards the end of the second season there, Spike and Carly were kind of a couple. They were dating in a way.
Yeah.
That if there was a son there, that was probably, and then they confirmed that in season 3.
Yeah. Although I must say, when I saw the movie, I didn't know who his mom was. Yeah. But you want to know, sometimes you don't need that person. You don't need to say anything. You can address something like that, like they did in the third season. Right. There's going to be more characters. They don't need to address everything.
Yeah, and
although it could have been done with a small piece of dialogue.
Yeah, and I also believe that, and Rick, you may have already pointed this out. I don't think that particular aspect of the story was pertinent to the movie's plot at this point. That they could address later, and they did address it. And this is Avi speaking again. This is something that may have crossed my mind years ago. Where's Daniel's mom? Was it the girlfriend whose name may have been Carly? Nothing's clear from what I can recall. This has got to be another flaw in some past works of fiction. You have a father figure, which is fine. Oh,
Well,
somebody.
one thing is they want to take this movie as standalone, but they also want to include the seasons before, but they don't want to do anything with it from before. They want to make this as almost standalone. They forget the stuff after, but oh yeah, we can reference before, but not after.
But that doesn't mean the mother should be absent. Even today's woke culture doesn't seem interested in fixing said flaws, but the way women see such contempt leveled at them and how they're reduced to political tools in the well, again, I don't agree that that's what they were doing. Again,
yeah,
I don't.
Just because she's not seen or mentioned doesn't mean she's absent. It just means for this
not pertinent
time
to the
frame
plot
she's out of the picture.
I think they have her more in the Headmasters spin-off that the Japanese were doing.
Well, they did. Yeah, they did have. Well, they also explained in the third season, they did bring her in and did clarify that, yes, she is Daniel's mother. Okay. So, and in the end, this history account certainly says something about huge setbacks in creativity for animation Hollywood. Well, here, based on that too, you would think that maybe he didn't watch all the seasons either, and that may have, that may be clouding his viewpoint there too. Yeah. For all we know, the 1986 Transformers cartoon film may have really damaged the potential to explore tougher things like the Japanese have long explored in movies and TV shows, and in sharp contrast to the absurd commercial path taken by Hasbro. Usually featured their own characters and had little to do with merchandise and were anything but marketed squarely at children. Of course, failure to cultivate a more teen adult market for animation is another embarrassment the U.S. industry's got to shoulder. I don't completely agree with that because throughout the 90s and early 2000s, you had that going on. So I don't know. Though The Simpsons may have changed things somewhat back in the day, much of the dreadful mentality that held back movies still remained for years. After.
Sorry. The other thing I was going to say is cartoons at that time were more mainly thought of for kids, not teens, not adults.
Go ahead. Most of the cartoons were just commercials for toys.
Yeah. Back around this time, anyways.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think is something sort of lacking nowadays in a lot of ways.
In fact, in the 90s, when they came up with the Ninja Turtles toy line, they told Kevin Eastman and Pierre Laird, you need to have a cartoon and a comic book. No, not Laird had the comic book. You need to have a cartoon to support the toy line.
Yeah. So, the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon came out, I believe it was 88 or 89 around there.
Well, late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
But the point is, it was designed strictly to support the toy line. It had nothing to do with making a cartoon that kids would enjoy. They wanted the kids to enjoy it to buy the toys.
Right. Years after and today, you have animators pushing wokeness upon children instead of taking the challenge of marketing content for adults. This is exactly why the USA anime industry is still such a fiasco. See it for yourself. Here's a link to the full-length film, and there you have the article there.
Yeah, but when we say woke cartoons, we're talking about the stuff that probably started around 2015. People argue earlier, but I say 2015 is when it really got really bad.
In terms of the woke messaging, you mean?
Yes, that's when they took off the safety locks and said, "Fuck it, we're doing it." I mean, sorry. They said, "The heck with it. We're just gonna let it fly."
Well, I would even argue that shows like The Simpsons, like Futurama, Family Guy, King of the Hill, Beavis and Butthead, Ren and Stimpy, those aren't even cartoons as much. Those are more adult animation because they're more.
Well, they're animated. They're things that are sent to animation. So how are they not cartoons?
They're
Well, 'cause-
cartoons. They're just cartoons for adults.
Exactly.
Well, because the original meaning of cartoon was actually when they came out back in the golden age, cartoon was actually a portmanteau, meaning caricature tune. In fact, it wasn't always spelled Cartoon. It was initially spelled Cartune.
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah,
you
and
look
cartoons
back,
were
when you
not
look back
originally
at the golden
animated either.
age. What was that? What was that?
And cartoons were not originally animated early either. The earliest use of it were in newspapers, like political cartoons.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, and again, that would have been for an adult too, right? Because
Yes.
kids wouldn't have had anything to do
A
with
cartoon
it.
just means that you're basically making a caricature of life. It's a tune kind of means like a duplicate, right? An other. So it's like cartoons were originally for adults. You can use the word loosely because everybody does now.
Cartoons were originally for adults. That kind of flips it around, doesn't it?
Well, kids weren't reading the newspaper.
But of course, most people think animation type stuff, especially, was for kids. And then, of course, now we have adult, quote unquote, cartoons, animation, however you want to word it, you know.
Actually, no. I think going back, you wouldn't even say that animation was for kids. Most of the people watching, like Felix the Cat, were adults going to the theater.
Well,
Yeah,
no, I'm just
you
thinking
even
back
had-
in the 80s. I'm thinking back in the 80s. You know,
even had
at that time, people were thinking cartoons were for kids. Sorry, Tim.
Well, I've been through me TV's Tune In With Me and some of the stuff they've been doing. They've been showcasing a lot of the golden age cartoon shorts, the Warner Brothers stuff, the MGM stuff, all that. And and as I have watched those, right, and I've I'll sometimes go to IMDb and I'll go to IMDb and look some of the trivia and notes up on it, right? And a lot of what they talk about is a lot of those cartoons that were made back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. They were usually put as part of a pre-show package for a movie. A pre-show package that would include a cartoon, a newsreel, and a travel log. So when you go to movies, if you were to go to a movie theater to watch a movie, before they would even start with a feature presentation, as people were coming in and stuff, you'd get a chance to watch like kind of a thing that had, including as a part of the pre-show package, was like a newsreel, a travel log, and a cartoon.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that too.
Were actually designed in many ways. There were aspects that they said that both adults and children could get at with a lot of those cartoons. Kids would get into like a lot of the slapstick and a lot of the slapstick comedy, while the parents would usually see a lot of, like, particularly as you get into the 50s and how things are changing and all that, they would appreciate that aspect of it.
Yeah. And one of the main reasons, too, is in older theaters, especially ones that only had, like, a single room for screening, they just had it running all day. So if you missed your show, you could just sit down and watch these, like, pre-screening things in between until the next showtime came up.
Yeah.
And maybe I was thinking maybe it would be for the 80s, but 60s, 70s, most people would have thought cartoons were just for kids, and still some people think that today,
Because they
But
don't look
as
in the
we
things,
know-
they just.
Sorry, Tim. Go
I
ahead.
said. I was going to say that's because people don't look into things. People usually are kind of sheep in a way that they think whatever they're told to think. So they think cartoons are for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people have like this strange ideals that somehow like entertainment should be sanitized or something. For some reason, that really bothers me that some people really want to kind of limit the kind of content people want to see. But I think, although on the other hand, some things should be not allowed to see because there are limits,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, or
But
possibly should be.
but if it's all rated, then you know exactly what you're getting into, and you have nobody but yourself to blame for that.
Yeah, and
Because
people
it's
can
properly
choose
rated.
what they want to see.
Yeah, but I don't know.
Well, I think that's also why theaters could always get away with more than TV could. There are certain arguments that I get back in the day when turning on TV was like the main way people got their media, which isn't the case now. TV is dying, right? Less and less people are watching it. More and more are getting their stuff from like streaming services or just online in general. So now you're basically opting into everything you watch. But back when everything was TV, especially back when there was less channels than there are now, right? You basically were tuning into a channel based on interest, right? Like, that's also why certain networks like Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon come around, is interest-based channels for age rating. And you want to make sure that whatever is on there is
Well,
only appropriate.
even those channels didn't start coming back till
No,
like
yeah, those are late. But interest-based channels start coming around when you start getting more channels, right? If you go further back, at some point, I remember my dad saying, like, yeah, when I was a kid, there was only 4 channels that you could watch, you know? You had to flip through them, and depending on what you got to see, depending on, like, the day of the week and the time of the day. So if he wanted to watch kids stuff, it would have to be, like, Saturday mornings. It was the only time he really could watch kids stuff. Everything else was adult programming.
Well, they did have kid programming in the week because, like when I grew up, not only did you have the Saturday morning cartoons on the 3 main networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, but you also had the syndicated cartoons that many of the independent channels would pick up, for the early mornings and the after school hours too. You know,
But Metal was more talking for his dad's day, which would have been a little earlier than our day.
Well, yeah. Okay, so TV actually, in terms of that idea, TV started really taking off like in the late 40s. Like, it was initially just on the East Coast in the early 40s, and then you had World War II, and then starting in the late 50s, that's when in fact, KTLA, which is a TV station out here in California, right? That was said to be one of the first, if not the first, television station west of the Mississippi, and that came in 1947.
If
Yeah,
you
well, my
use
main
Back
point is
to the
like,
Future, it's a
oh, I was
Go
just saying,
ahead,
my main
Metal.
point was I understand some of the restrictions and ideas that people had back when entertainment, same with radio, was strictly broadcast, right? Like you turned it on and it came to you. But now, most of entertainment is like totally opt in, right? It's not like you're opting in just by turning on your TV and trying to find a channel. Now, you actually have to go and search for what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, and then we still have the TV like that, but for most parents, and although I will admit there are some smart kids that can get around this, there is the parental control stuff that they can, if stuff that they don't want their kids seeing, block that off for them.
So, anyways, guys,
But-
we're coming up on 2.5 hours here, so. But I would say that was a pretty good. I'd say that was a pretty good discussion. What do you guys think?
I think so. I think at least from my point of view, I have a very strong opinion about that article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I did
have
too.
some strong opinions
you know.
about that article too.
It kind
I
of,
have, I have strong opinions about that person's mental faculties.
yeah. I
Which
kind of
one,
feel like,
Avi
Yeah.
or you're talking about the guy who wrote
Both.
The guy who wrote the article.
yeah, I kinda
Avi
feel
and
like
the other guy.
Mhm.
Sorry, Tim.
I kind of feel like he's the kind of person that blames entertainment for the actions of other people. At least that's what I felt like. I felt like he's a roundabout way of saying, that violent entertainment is the problem for all the horrible things happening today, like they've always been trying to do.
Yeah.
And there's a group of people that think that entertainment is to blame for all society's ills.
I
It's
don't know.
always been the case.
I think this is made because I've read a number of Avi's articles on this very channel, and if anything, I would say this is actually the first article where I may have gotten that impression that you got right there, because he writes a lot of Avi writes a lot of articles more on the comic side of things, and some of them are more in line with what most of us think about the comic scene. So, but this go ahead, Tim.
I mean, but there's always been a push to kind of sanitize anything that might actually make you think or actually make you.
It's Puritanism. Every generation has its version of Puritanism, and it hops around where it comes from. It's been around forever. You can go all the way back. It's just always going to happen.
Yeah, it's usually kind of pushed by people who don't understand the stuff that they're offended by.
Yeah. Well, with that, guys, as I said, we've gone on for like 2.5 hours here, and that was a very good conversation. I enjoyed it. So I think it's a good time we start wrapping up here. I think what we'll do first off, of course, with today being Sunday, May 17th, 2024, let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history.
This day or this weekend?
This weekend in Nietzsche history. I thought I said weekend, but
you said day.
Right.
You used to say day.
So first off, going back to yesterday, March 16th, 2024, going back 90 years ago yesterday.
And speaking of one of those cartoons,
right? 90 years ago yesterday, the Fleischer Studio short "Man on the Flying Trapeze" premiered in movie theaters on yesterday's date, 90 years ago today. And of course you had William Costello, Lou Fleischer, Mae Quetzal, William Pennell, all involved in the voice work. So the story
it was a Popeye cartoon.
Right, it was a Popeye cartoon, exactly. Popeye, the sailor, Popeye goes to pick up Olive Oil for a date, but finds out she went off to hang out with a trapeze artist. And the short they had a lot of music in it. You had this song, "The Man on the Flying Trapeze." So 90 years ago yesterday, Fleischer Studios' "The Man on the Flying Trapeze" premiered in movie theaters. So there you go, that one. Now let's see. Let me just remind myself here. Yeah, okay. Going back 19 years ago yesterday.
Well, that's not quite as far.
Going back 19 years ago yesterday. On yesterday's date in 2005, the penultimate issue of Human Target, issue number 20, went on sale from DC, their Vertigo imprint, on yesterday's date 19 years ago. Sold for $2.99, was 32 pages. Part 2 of the Steeler story, written by Peter Milligan, with art by Cliff Wu Chang. Clem Robbins did the lettering, and Lee Lowridge did the coloring. So the 20th and penultimate issue of Human Target went on sale on newsstands 19 years ago yesterday from DC's Vertigo imprint. So now moving on, of course, to today. So first off, heading back 40 years ago today, back to 1984.
It was the release of Transformers the movie. No.
No. On this date, 40 years ago today, a pair of Shin-Ei Shin-Ei animation movies premiered on today's date 40 years ago. There was Ninja Hattori-kun plus Permon ESP Wars. That film premiered on today's date 40 years ago. Also, Doraemon Nobita's Great Adventure into the Underworld also premiered on today's date 40 years ago today. So Shin-Ei Animations, Ninja Hattori-kun, and Perimon ESP Wars, as well as Doraemon Nobita's Great Adventures into the Underworld, both premiered on today's date 40 years ago.
Now, I've seen the last one.
Yeah, well, Doraemon is, as far as I know, a pretty popular anime.
It is, yeah.
I watched the 2003 version of it. It seemed like a pretty funny one, pretty interesting one. And finally, on this date 15 years ago today, the airing of the March 20th episode of SmackDown occurred on this date from the America Bank Center in Corpus Christi, Texas. The main event saw The Undertaker defeat John Bradshaw Layfield, but via submission. Jeff Hardy defeated the Brian Kendrick in an Extreme Rules match. And Montel Vontavious Porter, a.k.a. MVP, defeated Shelton Benjamin for the WWE United States Championship. So that happened on this date 15 years ago today. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Before we leave, of course, I want to give you guys a chance to do any outros. We'll start with Tim. We'll go kind of counterclockwise. If you guys want to, of course, Rick. Okay, I guess maybe I should start with Rick because he's already shared a link, I guess.
No, you start with Tim. Start with Tim. I thought you were going to just end without giving us time.
Go kind of counterclockwise here. So, Tim, if you want to go ahead, give an outro, maybe share any links, you know.
Okay, Melvin #1 special edition is available on Walmart, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Powell's websites. And it's coming soon, very shortly, Melvin #2, which I just approved the file.
Cover?
So it's going to file. Yeah. I had to look at the interiors.
All right. Was that what that meeting with RJ was about the other day? Was all that?
No, the meeting, the DM I got from him just now. I had to go and look at it. So.
Okay. All right. And is there anything more you wanted to add to that, Tim, or shall I move on?
No, there's nothing more to say about it.
Okay. All right. Well, Metal, you're up.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, ever since Thursday, we're back in full swing. So our schedule now is Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Central Time. And you can find us over on the Vomitorium Live YouTube. And yeah, Mondays are our kind of movies, film, TV shows, comics, anything in that general realm of media, the stuff where you're observing but not participating directly in. And on Thursdays will be the type of entertainment you're participating in. So video games, tabletop RPGs, board games, toys, collectibles, trading card games, anything of that nature. And you can also find any of the stuff I create for that type of entertainment over at my website, xdynamischaos.com.
All right.
Which is where my comics and web novels and stuff like that are.
All right. And anything else you want to add before I move on?
Nope, that's it.
All right, Rick, and I know that you shared a link there, so
yeah, a link to my just go check out my latest possible music for. In this case, it's Snowdrift. And earlier in the chat, I also put up a link to my latest first-time reaction video over on my Pied Piper of Hamilton channel. I watched Alien 3. Hopefully soon I will be watching the next one in the series and putting that up in the next week or two.
I'm shocked that
And
you'd
that's
actually
it
watch
for
any
me.
Alien anything.
Well, go watch my thing if you're that shocked. That way you can see my reaction. Yeah.
All right. Anything more you want to add, Rick?
No, I'm good.
All right. So I thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. I think we had some pretty good discussion going on, which I always love, just getting everybody to just come in, have a good discussion, get the brain working a bit, thinking critically about, the material. Of course, we'll be back here tomorrow night with, our Niche Newscast, Monday through Thursday, and this Friday, of course, we'll be doing our weekly historical comic retrospect. This week, I'll have Apex on with me from Apex Comics. We'll be continuing our look back to February 1940 of comics that went on sale in that month. This week, we'll be looking at comics that went on sale from Archie Comics, known then, of course, as MLJ Enterprises. And so I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow and every night. Until next time, bye!